Well, hello everyone, and we want to welcome you to this session where we'll be discussing the importance of individual and collective journey of racial healing. Our ask for you as we get started is to not use your chat. What we'd like to invite you to do is we'd like to invite you into our virtual circle, and we want to invite you to listen to what we will be sharing today and use this time as a time of reflection to really think about the actions that you want to take around this topic moving forward. My name is Tiffany Hester, and I will be the moderator for the panel. I currently live in Oakland, California. I have been part of Women Within, believe it or not, since February of 2020, where I first encountered my weekend experience. I then joined a committed circle. I stepped into the communications director role for the Western region. I've been actively involved in the Black Women Open Circle and consulting Women Within around the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the work that I do on my day job. And I am honored to introduce today's panelists to you. These three courageous, authentic, and trailblazing women who are also the co-creators of the Women Within 26-Day Journey: Natasha Taylor, Rebecca Ramirez, and Tessa, please forgive me, is it Boss?
It's Boss.
Boss, I love it, yes. Okay, well, welcome. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. They will be discussing how they created, or how we really can create a world of sustainable racial equity that requires individual and collective journey of racial healing. We want to begin with a call to action. And I want to acknowledge, as a Black American woman, that after the murder of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many others, my white counterparts reached out to me to ask what they can do. And my response was, take time to listen and understand the challenges, the obstacles that Black people and other ethnic minorities face, and then identify where you can make your greatest impact. What the 26-day racial equity journey means to me is that it provides an incredible opportunity for people to listen, to learn, and to identify where they can drive change around achieving social justice and race equity. I always say that change happens at two levels, at the organizational level and the individual level. And today we hope you are inspired to complete the 26-day racial equity journey for yourself. It will be an opportunity for you to do your own healing around racial healing, to learn about the challenges and obstacles that Black and brown people face, and to help you identify where you can drive change at the individual level. So let's get started. I want to throw the first question out to Tash. And the question is, for those who may not know about this program, how would you describe it in just a few words?
Thank you, Tiffany. And I'd like to start by thanking the elders for welcoming us into this space. It feels like a sacred circle to me, and so I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. And currently I'm looking at a whole lot of names and no faces. And so for me personally, if you want to turn your video screen on, turn it on, because I feel like I'm talking to no one right now except for myself. So I'm Natasha Taylor. I went through my Women Within weekend in 1998, which was almost 22 years ago. I am a certified Women Within facilitator since 2010 and co-creator of this journey, and I'm very pleased to be here. The 26-day racial equity journey is a self-guided journey that any adult, any gender can take. It's completely free. You access it online, and we provide 26 days of materials to watch, to listen to, and to absorb. Each day we give around 30 minutes of materials, and then some self-reflection questions, which are aimed at helping people really sink into the materials and get a sense of what they mean to them as an individual and in their life journey. And the goal of this journey is to open a space for racial healing and to deepen awareness of race, racism, racial equity, racial injustice, and where each of us fit into that picture.
Excellent. Thank you, Tash. So Rebecca, before we dig deep into the discussion, I'd like to ask you something that might be on the minds of the audience here with us today. It may appear that all three of you are white women presenting on this topic. Is there a concern about that for you, or how people may perceive the panelists today?
Sure, Tiffany, thanks. So my name is Rebecca Ramirez, and I thank also everybody to be here today and for inviting us to speak to you. I am currently the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for International Women Within, and I did my weekend in 2008 and in Kentucky. I'm originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and live in Indianapolis, Indiana. Have been living here for about 21 years. So I am a woman of color, a Latina, and in my experience, my experience has been like, moving to the United States to mainland, is that I've been treated as a minority. I mean, I speak with an accent, Spanish accent, and I am treated as a minority. Now, the 26-day journey, when we started it, we didn't think about races or ethnicities. It came about really in a way that was pretty beautiful to me. I got an email from a friend saying that I should do the 21-day American Bar Association challenge. And so I posted on Facebook saying, I invite my friends to join me. And Natasha sent me a comment saying, oh, that's super interesting. And then like a few days later, she said, wouldn't it be awesome to create something like this for Women Within? And I said, oh yeah, that would be awesome. And then we said, okay, why don't we do it? And then I know Tessa from working with her at the International Board. I know Tessa is a world explorer, world traveler that's been around the world taking racial justice programs. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be awesome if we could actually do this and bring Tessa as a global person? And so we started on WhatsApp and never stopped, worked around the clock. But really, I never thought about it as a racial thing. But I know Natasha might have some ideas of why this is maybe something that we should talk about.
Yeah, I actually think it's very important that Tessa and I are white. For centuries, people of color have been asking white people to wake up and to get into this work. And so Tessa and I are two women who have listened, who are waking up, and who are getting into the work. And so I think it's essential that we have white people leading in this work. White people need to see other white people leading. And I think that there's a really interesting element that we bring because we're white. We know what it's like to be white in this conversation. So Tessa and I know what the emotions are that come up. We know the shame, we know the guilt, we know the fear, we know the tears. We know all the strategies that white people might have. So the dismissing or the avoiding or the defending, all these things that white people do when race comes up, we're familiar with. And so I think that helped inform us when we created this journey of how to open doors to white people, to call them in, and to have them move past the common reactions and into a space of learning and into a space of opening. So I think it was essential that we be white.
That's powerful. Thank you, Rebecca and Tash. And I will tell you, from my professional career, there are spaces where there are only white people in the room. And so we need white people to step up and step in and lean into this conversation. And I often say the work around this space requires all of us to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so it may not feel easy when you begin to speak up and when you begin to raise your voice, but the more you do it, you'll build a comfort level and you'll build a confidence around where you can really make an impact. So Rebecca, let's continue. Let's jump into the actual journey. And as we think about week one, which is called Beginning, tell us more about the thought process that you used in choosing the materials for week one.
So the journey is that it's a journey. It's not a challenge. So when we created the journey, we thought about, okay, we wanted to be a descent, and we talked about like how it reminds us a little bit about what we do on the weekend when we're on the weekend Women Within, where we go on a descent. So week one was setting the stage. and setting the stage. I'm talking about some basic concepts that we needed to talk about so that before we got into the more difficult subjects and some of the more deeper stuff. So setting the stage, we talked about intersectionality, talking about, you know, having difficult conversations and how to disagree with people, how to just what's unconscious bias, those types of things. And one of the things that I know has been talked about a lot in the news lately, but it's that concept about being anti-racist instead of just not racist. So that's some of what we do on the week one.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. Well, Tessa, I want to bring you into the conversation. You have talked about the importance of us understanding the difference between saying, whether we're saying we're a non-racist, as Rebecca mentioned, versus committing to being an anti-racist. There's a video that you've shared with us that's very powerful. And first, I want to check it and see if it's possible for us to watch it.
I think I can. Let me see. Well, I don't know. If I share my screen, right? There.
And maybe while you do that, Rebecca, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Tessa Boss. I have been involved with Women Within since 2014, when I did my weekend in Cape Town, South Africa, where I lived for 14 years. I am currently based in The Hague, in the Netherlands, where I was, that's the country where I was born and raised until I was 18 years old. And I am the Global Liaison Director for Women Within International.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, Tessa. Rebecca, what do you think? We have any luck?
While Rebecca keeps doing that, there's something that I wanted to share. One of the questions that some people have asked us is how this journey is different from other things that are out there. And I think it's important to speak to that because we did create something that we think is quite different. We wanted it to be in the Woman Within way. And most of the materials out there are very intellectual. They're very much in the head. And so we wanted this journey to be something that was experienced in the body and was experienced emotionally and spiritually. And so that drove a lot of the decisions we made in creating this. And the other piece that was interesting for me as a Woman Within facilitator that guided a lot of what we chose to do is that we know that a purely intellectual approach on the carpet when we're working with someone usually doesn't work. Their protector is going to come up and it's going to do exactly that, protect and defend. It's going to say danger and then protect. And so we find ways within and around and under. And so that is why this journey is very much a descent. We're starting up in the light and in the intellect, and then we sink deeper into the body, and then deeper and deeper into the dark, murky places where true healing can take place. And so it's very much a descent. And the other piece that's important to us is that we know in Women Within work that we work somatically a lot of the time. We work in the body. And if you think about racism and the history of racial trauma, racism is acts of violence and oppression and discrimination that is done to the bodies of people of color. And so it's carried within the bodies, and it's carried within the bodies of white people too. And so we want this journey to be something that people, especially for me, especially white people, can feel it in their body, feel the injustice in their body and the inequality in their body, so that there's a greater chance of change from that place.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. So Tessa, why is the message in this video so important to you?
Sure. For me, this video is like, you know how you have like your favorite meditation that you want to wake up to in the morning? I think this video has kind of become that for me. I think it's such a short video, but it's so powerful in so many ways. I mean, first of all, like he says in the video, by saying, I am not a racist, you can deal with all the injustices in the world by not doing a damn thing. I think it's about realizing that what hurts one of us really hurts all of us. But it also speaks to being complicit in a system, and that the appropriate response to that is to be actively anti-racist. And then lastly, I think, the fact that he brings up racism as often being considered as a moral lapse, I think that's one of the most important reasons why we struggle so much with talking about racism, because we feel that, there's this definition around being a racist that is all about an individual person who consciously doesn't like people based on their race and is mean to that person. So that makes being racist and racism all around morality. And what we've tried to do with this journey is to really take people beyond that definition and to understand racism as a system, and to really open ourselves up to exploring, what our role is within that system, without getting kind of defensive and believing that our morals are being questioned. And all of that in 2 minutes, which is quite remarkable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very, very powerful. And it's so great to see the intention that all of you had as you went to create and build this journey. Tessa, I want to continue with you, and I want to go back to the journey. I found the daily reflections were a very important part of the journey. Can you explain how the daily reflections work as part of the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I also find that I think Tash often says, that the magic is in the reflection questions, and I agree. I think at Women Within, we really use questions to bring things home, to internalize things. Tash was explaining earlier, that, and it's very important to not just do this work on an intellectual level, but really take it into ourselves, into our bodies. And that's really what we've tried to do with the reflection question. So for example, after watching the video that we've just watched together, we asked in the daily reflections for people who are white to go back to a time when they were challenged about racism, and to go back to the defensive reaction that may have come up at that time, and to really reflect on that, and to ask themselves what kind of unchecked, unexamined assumptions they may have had in that moment, and to be with that. So I think by those questions, those reflection questions, that's really where the work is. Yeah,
absolutely. I love that. Because what I'm hearing you say is it allows people an opportunity to really internalize the content and really think about how it has impacted them. And I think that's so important, because so often people struggle with knowing what to do because they haven't taken the time to have their personal connection to this work.
Absolutely.
And the reflections help you to do that. That's powerful. All right.
And I think that's what makes it a real Woman within journey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. All right, let's pivot to week 2, which is titled Listening to the Other. On that week, we listened to stories. I love the explanation that you provided for week 2. Deep listening is an act of love and respect in which we set down our own judgments and feelings and step into the world of another. Imagine this week as a road trip. We're all hopping into this big metaphorical bus together, traveling from homes into our bodies, hearts, and to the bodies, hearts, and minds of others. As you listen this week, try to also hear what is not said. Listen for the emotions beneath the words. Listen for the pain, fear, anger, shame, and joy. Notice when you want to respond with an explanation or a story of your own. Notice when you want to defend yourself or challenge the other's experience. Notice what happens in your body, as Tash has encouraged us to do, as we listen to the stories. So Tash, I want to start with you. What was your own personal experience doing week 2?
I would say week 2 was, well, it was a very emotional week for me, creating that week, because in order to find those stories, we had to watch a lot more stories and listen to a lot more stories and read a lot more stories. And so for me, it was the volume of pain that jumped out of me. And I've been trying to think if there was one specific story that stood out, and I can't pick one, because for me, I think that's what speaks the loudest, is how many stories we had to sift through to find just a few to show.
Wow.
And, yeah.
That's great, Tash. Rebecca or Tessa, any other thoughts about week 2 for you and your experience?
Well, week 2 is, I think week 2, again, we're starting to get in the descent. We're starting to get into the deeper stuff, but it's still light. And so I enjoyed watching the story about the Latinx, it's called a conversation with Latinx people, because I could relate so much. And I was like, oh yeah, that's my family right there. And I really, really like I think it's the first day of that week 2, the story, it's a TED Talk that's called The Danger of a Single Story. And that one just sets the stage again. It's the first day of that week, because it's telling you, whenever you hear a story, do not think that you have the whole story figured out. Because that's the danger of a single story. And I love that video. It's just, I go back and back to it all of the time now, in my head, when I'm interacting with some other people, or even in my circle. It's like the danger of a single story. So that's for me. Yeah.
That's powerful. I completely agree. I love that video. And it's very powerful, and it's very reflective. And so it's really great. So you got to check it out. So Tess, let's pivot to week 3. I'm sorry, Tessa, let's pivot to week 3, which is called Intergenerational Trauma. Can you explain what that term means to you?
Well, I think it's important that we brought that into this journey. Look, research shows that actually trauma that is being experienced by one generation can be carried into the generations to follow. So what that means is that we each actually potentially could be carrying some of the psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds of our ancestors. And the opportunity is in breaking that cycle by healing and freeing the next generation from that trauma. So when we speak about this topic, you cannot not go there. And what we're hoping is that this journey will, for some people, be a start of healing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I will say for me personally, week 3 was hard because of the materials were very hard to watch. And I think as a Black woman, there's so much of the history for my people that you can't allow yourself to even digest it and understand it and get your arms around it, because you spend every day of your life just trying to survive. And if you really allow yourself to take in the experience that people who look like you have had, it can paralyze you. And so the videos during this week, you see videos on slave trade, post-slavery America, American lynchings, for example. So Rebecca, and if we have time, we'll have the others join in. But what do you say to people that think that slavery and lynchings are part of the past, and that we should just leave that in the past?
Well, I you know, that's very common in the news and discussions that I've had with people, with kids. You know, it's like, well, so what? So is that just history? Is that just the past? Can we just move forward? And to me, it's just not ancient history at all. And as the videos and materials show, slavery just morphed into something else. So what it morphed into is the, you know, school to prison pipeline. We have in America a criminal justice system that is broken. And so we have a enormous disproportionate amount of African American men and women in prison and taking, sentences that are much longer for the same offenses than others. So, and then, you know, the privatization of the prison system. So now we know that people are actually profiting from free labor. And then the American lynching, well, if we still see it. I mean, George Floyd is the example, but we're still seeing it today. It's just morphed into something else. So because this is a journey of healing, we cannot heal until we have faced the past. And we cannot fix it until we acknowledge that all we have is just a bunch of stuff that is present because of the past. So I think that the week 3 was super hard. And at the same time, we cannot skip over it and realize this is history still going on. And if we're going to fix it, we need to reckon with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tessa or Tash, any additional thoughts regarding week 3?
I think that that saying of let's just move on is a very convenient response, because it means that no one has to take responsibility. Mm-hmm. No one has to be accountable for what happened in the past. And it means we don't have to actually do anything.
Exactly.
And so I think that everything that Rebecca said is absolutely spot on, is that I think everyone on this call, I believe, has either gone through the New Warrior Training Adventure or the Woman Within Weekend. And so we know on an individual level how important it is to heal individual trauma and individual wounds before we can move on. We have to bring things into the light. We have to hold them and experience them and figure out what they mean to us and move on from that place. And the same is for this trauma that is huge. It's spread across the world. And it's not as simple as just saying, let's move forward. We have to look at it. We have to face the past and reckon with it.
Absolutely. But for the sake of time, since we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left, I'm going to move to our next question. And Tash, I'm going to ask you, as we move looking at week 4, which is called What is Whiteness? For many white people, we never consider how whiteness affects our daily life. And for many white people, the answer is to be colorblind, to not see race or ethnicity or color. What are your views on this topic? Tash?
Well, for me, colorblindness is a pet peeve. I can get really animated talking about it. I come from South Africa, where this was not a concept that was part of my growing up, because we spoke about race all the time. We were asked to see race all the time. It was demanded of us. So when I moved to America and I heard people talking about being colorblind, I thought this is ridiculous, because when I look at someone, anyone on this video, if I'm looking at Joanne, Marla, I see the color of her eyes, I see the color of her hair, I see the color of her glasses, and I see the color of her skin. To say that I can't see that is really ridiculous. And so I think that it's may have been intended as a positive thing, this idea of this is the goal we want, is to not be seeing race. And that is a beautiful goal, but we are nowhere near that. And so I just think it's not realistic. And I also think that it's harmful, because when I don't see the color of your skin, Tiffany, I don't see everything you've experienced because of the color of your skin. I don't see the pain you've experienced because of it. I don't see the things about yourself that you cherish and celebrate because of the color of your skin. So when we don't see someone else's color, we're actually not seeing all of who they are, the pain and the beauty. And so if we want to really know someone, we have to acknowledge the color of skin and really see them in that place. And then I think that this whole concept of whiteness is so important to explore, because white people have essentially, we've made ourselves the default, right? We don't really talk about the color of our own skin. There are all these other people out there who have black skin and brown skin and yellow skin and whatever we describe it as, but we don't really ever own our white skin. And, you know, if I look at novels written by white authors, in most novels, if you take a look, you'll notice that the white characters are never defined by their skin color. So they'll be introduced as she's blonde, she's got blue eyes, she's petite, and they'll describe her demeanor. As soon as a character of color is brought into the story, the first thing that's identified is the color of their skin. And so I think it is so important for white people to start to see themselves as white and to understand what it means to be white historically, what it means to be white today, and what we want it to mean moving forward. And I think that this is not true for all white people, but a lot of white people carry shame around whiteness and don't want to go there. And so I think about, what do I want the future of whiteness to be? And what can that look like? And we can't get there until we've grappled with the history of whiteness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's powerful. I will say, as a woman of color, what resonates for me in that is when people think about, I'm just going to survive through the world being colorblind. For me, it's not seeing necessarily my blackness. It's just seeing me. And I think when people lead with that mindset of, I'm just going to be colorblind, I won't look at color, it also invites them to not see the person. And so as a woman of color, I navigate a world where I constantly don't feel seen. And I remembered when we did our Black Women's Open Circle and we checked out, one of the comments one of the Black women shared as she was checking out is she said, for the first time, I feel seen and I feel loved. And as a person of color, that is what you want. Every day you wake up is to feel seen and to feel loved, as we all want to. So thank you for that. I get emotional every time I think about it. So I know we're running out of time, but Rebecca, just really quick, the last journey is called Understanding Systemic Racism. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I feel like this is NPR. You have 2 seconds to answer a really big question. You know, systemic racism is everywhere. I mean, it's where our systems, racism is embedded in the systems everywhere we move. So it's the political systems, the educational, the housing, the healthcare, the criminal system, the legal system. So it's everywhere. And so it's embedded. We live in it, whether we like it or not, whether we know about it or not. And so when we did that week, we knew, I mean, like Natasha was saying, like we looked at so many materials and we had to choose a few just to show this really is big, huge. Racism is everywhere. And the way you know it is because the result of all those structures is that there's a race that is always on top, and then there's a race that is always on the bottom. And so that's how you know it, even though there are no rules that are, you know, written. And one of the things that I like to tell people is, like, even laws. I mean, there's been laws on the books about discrimination being illegal, and that doesn't change that discrimination is happening every day, all day long. So it's not about changing the laws. The system is rigged, and we need to look at it this way. Until we look at it, we cannot change it. So that's what it means to me.
That's wonderful. Now, as we wrap up with our final minute, Tessa, I want to throw it to you. Starting with you, and the others can jump in. What is your personal action that you'll be taking towards creating a just world?
Thanks for that, Tiffany. That's a really beautiful question. Well, that's how we end the journey, although the journey obviously never ends. But on day 26, people are being asked to create their own personal action statement. And so did we as creators, and also participants in the journey in our own circles. For me, it's very much about every day creating spaces around me in which people can really show up as their full selves. And in addition to that, that also means I'm speaking up in those spaces. Because creating safe spaces is not about being silent. Mm-hmm. It's about speaking my truth and allowing other people to speak their truth, and creating conditions, very importantly, creating conditions in which everybody can speak their truth, right?
Yes.
And in addition, I work for governments in the Netherlands. And for me, there is huge, I don't have a very powerful role. I'm a project lead, but I lead policy teams. And for me, there is power in that, because that means that I can really help myself and the people around me to check themselves, to check their biases, to check their assumptions, to check how open their minds are and with whom they have had the conversations on which they build the policies that are going to impact people. So yeah, so that would be mine.
That's powerful, Tessa. And I was told we have 5 more minutes, so would definitely want to hear from Rebecca and Tash as well. What's the personal action you'll be taking?
I think for me, this is one of them, is I'm committed to leading in our community around this. I've shied away from that for so long, to speak up about this, and yet it's something that I feel in my bones. And so my commitment is to keep leading our community in this. And as Tessa said, one of the big pieces of this journey, because it's not just about going within and feeling a whole lot of things, it's about getting into action at the end. And so part of the commitment of the journey is, for me, is to help others identify what is one thing that resonates with them that they can get out there and do. I think there's so many creative ways to get into this fight, to be in this movement, to be a part of it. It doesn't have to look one way. We don't all have to go to protests. There's so many different ways. And I believe completely that every single person has one unique thing, that every person on this call has one unique thing that you can do. And so that's part of my commitment with this journey, is to help people find that. And then the other piece for me is I'm a mother of a 7-year-old. And from the moment he was born, I was committed to teaching him about consent, because I'm a woman and that's huge for me. I want men to understand consent. And so I realized that I need to be teaching him about this as well. And so I'm committed to simple things like reading him books that have characters of color, and then more complex things like explaining to him why there are protests, explaining to him why his Black friends at school are upset and not in class, and actually having those tough conversations. So I think that that's also something that anyone who has a child or a grandchild can do. And, you know, we're sitting on a call with elders, and I know that there was either a talk yesterday or coming up tomorrow by Joanna Klein about legacy, and this idea of what is the legacy we will leave behind. And I think to myself, I don't want my son to be sitting 20, 30 years in the future having the same conversation and talking about the same shit. I want things to change. And so I want us, those of us on this call, to be the ancestors that people look back on and say, they did something. So yeah, that's my commitment.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tash. And Rebecca?
I can't say it better than what Tessa and Tash just said. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. When I finished the journey and looked at what my mission would be, my mission is to lead in this place and to speak up. So my responsibility is about myself and looking and being aware of my unconscious biases and when they pop up all the time. And I'm like, oh, there it is again. And I'm aware, being conscious and aware about my own stuff. And also when I see it out there, to speak up and to help others to see it also and be like, hey, can we move forward? So yeah, I'm living and breathing this, and it's been an honor to create this with Natasha and Tessa. It's been one of my proudest things that I've done. I'm so glad to have this opportunity.
That's wonderful. Well, Natasha Taylor, Rebecca Ramirez, and Tessa Boss, thank you. Thank you for creating the 26-day journey, for being vulnerable with us today, for sharing your truth and telling your stories, and for saying yes to doing your part to drive change around social justice and race equity. I want to thank all of you who have joined us in this conversation today. We hope you leave inspired to want to complete the 26-day racial equity journey and to use it to find your personal way that you can drive change at an individual level around achieving social justice and race equity. We wish all of you well and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.